Okay, hello there everyone, and welcome to today's University Business Web Seminar. It's great to have you all with us. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Kurt Eisler-Durley. I'm the Web Seminar Editor for UB, and I'll be your moderator. The title of our event, as you see here, is The Next Generation of Community Engagement, and is being brought to you through the generous support of our sponsor for today, Thoughtexchange. First, as people are still coming in, a bit of background about our topic for today. Community, faculty, and student engagement are important components of college and university strategic and facility planning. But many traditional methods of gauging public opinion or gathering input, such as surveys or town hall meetings, are flawed and can be misleading, often being disproportionately influenced by the loudest or most negative voices. Today we'll be learning more about the next generation of far more effective and accurate community engagement methods in higher ed. The president of Camosun College in Victoria, British Columbia, will discuss how her institution employed a structured online platform for two recent community engagement efforts and saw thousands of stakeholders share their thoughts and learn from one another about what matters most regarding the future of the college. We're looking forward to a very interesting presentation and discussion here, plus live Q&A. We welcome your questions, so do stay tuned. We're going to get started in just a minute or two here. But before we do, just some quick housekeeping here. If you're having any trouble listening through your computer speakers at any time, or if you'd prefer to listen over the telephone, we'll post the phone number and access code in the chat panel that you should see at the right margin of your screen there. You can use those numbers to dial in and get audio access over the phone at any time if you need it. Also, speaking of that chat panel, you can also use that to send a message to our host and producer. His name is Joseph Morrow. If you just select his name there and let him know if you're having any other technical issues, he'll be able to help you out there. If you have a question for our speakers today, please feel free to use the Q&A panel. You should see at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Just make sure it's set to all panelists, like it says on the slide here. Just type in your question there at any time during the presentation. We'll answer as many as possible when we get to the Q&A at the end. So again, if you have a question, feel free to type it in at any time in the Q&A, bottom right-hand corner there, and we'll answer as many as possible at the end. So we welcome your questions there. Also, speaking of questions, a common question we get is asking about the recording and the slide deck for our presentations. And yes, both will be available to everyone who registered or attended here today. You'll be getting a follow-up email thanking you for attending, and that will have links later on today to the slides as well as the archive recording where you can find it on the UB site. So don't worry about that. If you want to go back over the presentation, if there's information in here you want to share with your team at your institution, you'll have opportunity to do that. Okay, so again, thanks so much for being with us today. On to our program. Today we're fortunate to have with us Sherri Bell. She is president of Camosun College there in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada. She's joined there by Kevin Skelcher. He's VP of Client Engagement at Thoughtexchange. Kevin is going to start us off here today. Kevin and Sherri are there in the same room. So at this point, I'll turn it over to them. Kevin and Sherri, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to our web seminar.
Thank you, Kurt. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Kurt said, I'm Kevin Skelcher, the VP of Client Engagement, one of the founding members here of Thoughtexchange, and just happy to be with you all. I'm going to start, and I thought I would just start by sharing a little bit about what Thoughtexchange is and how we support and how we supported Sherri to run their exchanges. So I'll talk a little bit about why we do what we do and what it is that we do, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sherri here to talk about, her staff strategic planning process, and then their facilities planning process as well. And then we'll wrap up with we'll wrap up with any questions that you have as listeners. So as a company, we're really about bringing people together, and in order to bring people together, there's a few things that we need to overcome. So one of them is overcoming this idea that loud voices can dominate face-to-face conversations. And so we wanted to be, and also, using social media can also dominate sort of online conversations as well. And so we want our work to be really about hearing from as many people as possible, but then really allowing a safe, thorough process to take place where people get to feel that they're part of a conversation, and also that they aren't worried about some of the challenges that happen in sort of the face-to-face setting or online as well. The other thing that we're also addressing is this idea of how do you move beyond sort of a shallow or polarizing survey? How do you really get to the underlying interests of the group, and how do you allow people to share what's important for them? So we address that in our work. And then finally, it's this idea of building consensus in extremely time-sensitive matters. So we want to make sure that we can bring a group of people together around a change, build consensus, and in a time and a way that expedites the process. So what is it exactly that we do? Well, like I said, it's about bringing people together, and we do that by asking people to participate in a three-step process. So first, people get a chance to share their thoughts independently and confidentially. Next, they get a chance to review some of the ideas of other people and rate the thoughts. And finally, in Discover, we get to learn together about what's most important. What does that look like? Well, first, people are given the question and some background. The background can be text or a video. You'll notice here that the platform is designed to be mobile first. We're seeing a lot of people participate that way more and more. And once they get the background and they review it, they then answer the question first by putting in their thoughts and then adding in the detail below. They can put in as many thoughts on the topic as they like, and also share what's important to them about that thought. Third, they get a chance to review the thoughts of others and place stars on those thoughts, either giving something 5 stars because they really like it, or 1 star because they don't. And then finally, in the Discover step, the results are presented first in a top thoughts report. So looking at which ideas rise to the surface based on how many people place stars beside them. And then also we can take that analysis or we can take that data and run it through our data visualization tools and do some analysis on that. Part of the service that we provide is this service called real-time moderation. So when you're doing a public process, it's really important that nothing sort of rude or hurtful or inappropriate is shared out during the star step, because that undermines the exchange that you're running. And so our team will read through every single thought that's submitted by your participants and make sure that nothing goes forward that shouldn't. I just mentioned there a little bit about the visualization tools that we have, and it's quite a robust suite. And so a lot of the tools that we provide are really ways that you can look at the information and make decisions and make sense of it in a timely manner. So taking all of the top thoughts and bucketing in those into themes and sub-themes is something we call interactive bar charts. We also can create heat maps where we are able to look at different demographics and how those themes, how the thoughts that people give tie to the themes and to the demographics or overall satisfaction, and what ideas are most important to, say, your staff that has the highest or lowest levels of satisfaction. Or if you're a college that has multiple sites, we can also break down the data based on that as well. Other kinds of analysis we focus on are things like shift analysis, so looking at what kinds of thoughts are presented in the share step, and then maybe how people sort of change their mind based on the star step to, they said something was important at the beginning, but then after they're exposed to different ideas, they change their mind and say, actually, well, these other ideas are more important. So understanding how the group shifts would be another kind of interactive visualization that we can provide. So how is this different than the work that you're probably doing? Because we know that all of our partners are using surveys and polling and doing face-to-face meetings, so why use Thoughtexchange? Well, what we've been finding is that when you run a survey, it's really about the leader having a conversation with many. So it's a one-to-many kind of thing where the participants are really giving you as the leader the feedback. And in Thoughtexchange, it's about the one facilitating a many-to-many conversation. So the group is actually learning together. The group is actually a part of the part of the process, and it's also a part of the results. Why the many-to-many conversation is important is because it allows for certain things to happen. So one is, the first thing is that the leader can invite the group into a conversation in a respectful way where they can demonstrate listening. The group can learn and listen from one another. They have the experience of being heard, and because they're helping to drive the process, they can take more ownership of that. And then the group is able to reflect back to the leader the common interests, maybe where there's areas of disagreement or areas of influence like you see there. And this is just an example of, or this is just a map of our customers in North America, and the number there is that we've had, in the last 7 years, we've had over 1 million participants get involved in various thought exchanges across the US and Canada. And now I'm going to pass it over to Sherri here.
Good morning from Victoria. Good afternoon if you're in other parts of our countries. I'm going to tell you two stories of using Thoughtexchange to really enhance our engagement at Camosun College. And I'll start with a little bit of a background. I arrived here 2.5 years ago, and when I was interviewed for the position of president at Camosun, the board made it really clear that they wanted a new strategic plan. The old one was out of date and a little bit cumbersome as far as the number of goals and the size of the actual document. So when I came here, I spoke with our institutional research department and some of my VPs about wanting to make sure that we had lots of voices, lots of opportunity for faculty, students, and staff to engage in the new strategic plan. We have 2 campuses, over 1,000 employees, and almost 20,000 students. And to do that can be pretty complicated. So I pitched the idea of using Thoughtexchange to start our process and then develop the process that I'll explain in just a second. There we go. So we created some questions that we could send out to our community, and I've got them on the screen right now, because there was some attachment to the previous strategic plan. We wanted to know what still made sense to them, what direction should we be going, and then how can we support our students in the future. And really, we worked a fair bit of time on those questions, but in the end, it was the feedback, not really the questions, that really resonated as we moved forward. So those questions were sent out, and we had 375. This is the staff, so that's faculty and staff that participated. There was over 1,000 thoughts that were contributed, and then almost 40,000 stars. And the process itself, you'll see from the second time we used it, actually the number of participants increased. The people that took part really enjoyed the process too, because it was like having a room full of people putting their ideas up and then going around with the little sticky notes and putting stars beside the posters, the thoughts on the posters that we used to do. Now, what the feedback that I got initially from folks at Camosun was staff, even more so than faculty, felt that they could take part. Some of the directors and deans in our schools wanted their staff to participate, so they gave them time during the day to do that. Others said, you know, I've got 3 kids and I go right home after work. They participated at home. And when they put their thoughts in, that was one thing. But the most exciting part, as far as the feedback we received, was that when they had a handful of stars that they could go in and star other people's ideas. And they could also see their own ideas and, you know, were their ideas being reflected and starred as well. We then took the information and we created a first kind of draft of our goal areas. And so my Senior Leadership Council took the information that we collected from Thoughtexchange and created a very, very first draft of possible goal areas. We were also looking at our vision, updating our vision and mission statements as well. So that was done through the Thoughtexchange process and the feedback that we got. We then sent the draft out to the college community and did some face-to-face. And during those face-to-face sessions, we didn't get the typical room full of people that were there to put forward their own ideas. People were there looking at the first draft and giving very specific feedback from their perspective. And they were really thoughtful sessions. I was at all of them and was able to take away information to create a second draft. And that draft went to our Board of Governors and went out to the college community again, back to our Senior Leadership Council, and then we created a third and final draft. And what happened during that process is we were able to tweak things, and the faculty and staff and students at the college could see how transparent the process was. That was key to them. This is a very engaged community, a very positive culture, and people want to see themselves reflected in the strategic plan. And I'll share a little story about one of the changes that we made. In the first draft, we had sustainability, the idea of sustainability running through some of our goal areas. We clearly heard back in the face-to-face session that no, the people at this college believe that sustainability should be a goal area in and of itself, on its own. And so we made that change. And I don't think there could have been anything better for us, because that's come up over and over again as an example of how we listen, how we engage people at the college. It was a great kickoff to my presidency and also to our strategic plan. So we ended up with 4 goal areas, 3 of which came up through the initial process, and then the last one that we added on based on the face-to-face feedback. So that's the story of our strategic plan. And feedback, again, was very positive as far as the process goes. So the next time we, which is just recently, we're looking at, again, collecting feedback and engaging our community. Was just last spring. So we've had our strategic plan. It's been up and running for a year. And we have a campus plan that has been quite out of date, and government supported a new building at Camosun on one of our 2 campuses, which meant we needed to create a new campus plan, but bigger than that, we also needed to look at every space that we have. And we have over 50 buildings on both campuses, and you know how over the years, different departments end up where they are just because of circumstance. So we wanted to really thoughtfully look at, it's an opportunity with a new building to look at some synergies, look at proximity to programs, along with moving 1,200 faculty and students from one campus to the other campus. So our campuses will no longer be balanced. And we weren't really even sure where to start. We had a few retreats and kind of went around in circles. It's exciting to get a new building, but it's also causes some pretty big issues for the college itself. So after one of our retreats, we decided let's just go back out to the college community and start with them. And what we decided to do is to ask 3 questions. And the questions are on your screen. There were very general questions. And again, it wasn't really, people answered questions based on what they thought the question actually meant. And it gave us a lot of information that through the process we're able to be clustered, because it was really all over the map as far as the importance of what people wrote down. So in this process, what we wanted to do is really hear from the community so that when we do go out with an RFP to hire a consulting firm who has an expertise in this kind of area, that we could tell them this is what's important to our students and staff at Camosun. So by collecting that information, we really wanted to be able to tell the college community, we listen to you, and this is how we're going to structure the work of the decisions that are going to be made and the work of the consultants. So those were the questions that we asked. Now, what did we get from there? You can see that the participation rate went up, and I really believe it went up because, not because this topic was any more important, it was because people trusted the process. People found it very easy, and there was an element of fun involved too when you talk to people about what they were doing, and and seeing their own thoughts reflected. So we had over half of our on this one, over half of our employees, and we had over 50,000 stars. So that gave us a lot of data. And as you know, in any post-secondary institution, data can be your friend or it can be your enemy. And it can work in different ways. And so for us, what we really wanted to say was, how do all of these suggestions actually fit under those 4 large goal areas or corner posts of our strategic plan? And so we asked Thoughtexchange, could you just cluster the information that you get under the headings of our strategic plan so that when we go out to the college to give them the information that we collected, they can, it's a way of reiterating the importance of the strategic plan, that it isn't just something that we put on a shelf, we actually use it to make budget decisions and to make decisions for the future of the college. And so that's what we got. And in this next slide, this is just one example of the information that we received back. So what we have at the top is student gathering space was the 2nd largest theme. By the way, the first was student residence. But I'm using this as an example because we heard this not from students, we heard this from employees, that the 2nd most important topic to be looking at when we're doing a new campus plan was student gathering space. A lot of our buildings were built in the 1970s when that wasn't, what was built into a post-secondary structure. We have some great space, but not in every building. And it was really heartening to see that student residence and student gathering space for our employees came up to the top. And so if you take a look at the slide, it just shows you that 12% of the stars, which is the 2nd largest theme, talked about the importance of having gathering spaces both inside and outside to create a sense of vibrancy on campus as well as a sense of community for our students and for our faculty. And so this was the information we received back. This is just one sample of it, that we were able to then take to our Senior Leadership Council, share with them, and talk about, all right, if this is what our employees are saying, and we had a different process with students, and I'll explain that just at the end here. If this is what's important to our employees, how do we feed this in to building principles in which we guide decisions and which the company that we will eventually hire to create the new campus plan and restructure the 2 campuses, how do we create these into high-level principles? And so we did. We had again, a day retreat with all of our deans and directors and my vice presidents. And from the information we gathered, we created a two-page document that kind of outlined the principles that came from the community feedback. And so just last week, we sent those principles out via email to everyone at the college and our board and said, so what do you think? Do you think these hit the mark? This is what you told us, and this is where we're going to be going as far as how decisions are going to be made. I also do a lot of communication either through videos or face-to-face within the schools, and I have done so in the last 6 months about what I'm calling the big move. This is a big change for people, and wanting people to know that, you know, this isn't just going to affect our health and wellness school, which is moving. It will affect everyone. If you're in biology, it could affect you. This change could affect someone in arts and science or the School of Business. So this is important that you understand that it could and will affect the college as a whole. So tell us what you think of these principles. So from there, we'll get the feedback in and take it in the steps that I described a little earlier. So two different processes. One was for the strategic plan, and the second is to look at the changes that we're going to be having in our facilities across both campuses. And when I think about, you know, I think no matter as a president, no matter how well you communicate, there are always going to be people that say that there hasn't been enough engagement, collaboration, or communication. And I'm sure there's some of you chuckling right now because that happens everywhere. The really interesting part of using the processes that we've used for both the strategic plan and the initial processes for the facility changes is that when I talk to people about what we're doing, no one can say they haven't had the opportunity to be involved. And with, you know, with over half of the employees giving feedback, I just don't hear that at all, no matter where I am, particularly about these two large-scale changes. So people do have a lot of opportunity to be involved. Now, I want to talk about students just for a second because many of you are probably wondering where do the students fit in. Our college for quite a few years was in a deficit position as far as finances go. The last 3 years have been quite good as far as budget, and we've been able to reinvest a lot of money back into the college to support students. So our infrastructure wasn't at a place where we could actually access email addresses for all students. We are at that place now, but we weren't when we started the strategic plan. So it would be hit and miss to use the Thoughtexchange process for students. At this point, we can. So what we did with students is we did a whole different process. And it was a lot of face-to-face and small groups along with classroom visits. So it was more, we didn't actually hit as many students as we wanted to with gathering their input. Now that we can, and we have the ability to access those email addresses through this process, so through the facility changes, we will be looking at utilizing those email addresses with students. So that concludes my part of the conversation about Camosun College and the ways that we've used Thoughtexchange within the process that we created as an extra tool, as a way of engaging and collaborating with faculty and staff. So one of the conversations that we've had is, so where does this all fit in with leadership? And I think you could put a lot of different words up here, but when you think of the processes that we all engage in to bring our community into being reflected in the decisions that we make, I think it speaks to three things. Respect is one, and under respect, it really is respecting and valuing the views, the thoughts, the experience of the people that work here, that learn here. It's engaging, it's being transparent, and it's communicating so that, you know, I talk a lot about leadership and how important that the whole relationship building and that part of our job is so important, because if you don't build trust and respect, everything else we do falls apart. And so you have to have that credibility. And I find that this was a really easy way as a new president at a college that I didn't work at before I became president to very quickly engage in conversations around the strategic plan that were engaging for them, but also very transparent. So it's respecting the people that we serve. And I found the processes, as far as the feedback I received, really did that. I'm really big on ownership, whether it's with my senior leadership group. When they leave the room, if we've made a decision, we all own it and we have to support it. But in this way, it's actually ownership wider than that. It's the ownership for where we're going collectively. We have, with our strategic plan, the values that came out of the process. They're on flags all over both campuses. There's a really clear way of marketing our strategic plan with the different colors that we've used. And people can see themselves reflected and take ownership in the direction that we're going as a college, but also in the greater Victoria community, because we have a huge impact on, you know, we have a $1 billion economic impact on the South Island, which is where our college is. So there's an economic, but there's also the social impact that we have, and the idea we are the one and only college in this area, and we are their college. And so people do see themselves reflected and take ownership. And of course, culture always trumps everything. There's always great things about culture, and there's always things that we can be looking at changing. But I think what we were able to do is to honor the culture that was here, which is a very positive place, and take it a step further. And I think that that level of collaboration and engagement has been critical to making sure people understand that I am a reflection of the culture, I support the culture, and as all cultures do, we need to grow and move as our students need us to. And this is a very student-centered organization. And I kind of feel badly that I'm not talking about the students' engagement as much as I am faculty and staff, but you know, we're ready to engage with students in a different way right now. So I'll leave it at that and pass it back to Kevin or to Emma or Kurt for any further thoughts. Thank you.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Very, very interesting, Sherri and Kevin. Thank you so much. Yes, we're going to get to the Q&A portion here. First, just a couple reminders. Thanks to everyone who's been submitting questions. We did get some questions in the chat window there. You just want to make sure you put your questions in the Q&A, bottom right-hand corner, not the chat window there. It'll put it into a queue for us. It makes it a lot easier. And also another reminder, if you're interested in the slides or the archive recording, everyone will be getting a follow-up email, once again, with links to those, so you can access the presentation later if you want to go back over it or share with anyone on your team at your institution. Yeah, let's get to some questions here. Again, thanks to folks been submitting questions here. This one came on early on as you were speaking there, Sherri. You were focusing on the faculty and staff engagement, and you mentioned at the end there student engagement. Someone just was asking about, will you cover engagement with students? They work for an institutional store, and they're trying to determine if this is relevant to their work and their role there. Sherri or Kevin, you have thoughts about engaging with students, or Sherri, could you talk about the student engagement piece?
That's great. So I can jump in here, Kurt. So thanks, Paul, for your question. So first of all, great question. And second, the focus today was really about faculty and staff, and that's just where Camosun had started. So in our work in general at Thoughtexchange, though, reaching out to students is an important piece of what we do. One, just to make sure that when making changes that students have a voice in it, and two, making sure that the decisions that are being made are going to impact student learning in the right way. So even to Sherri's example about the staff here organizing around the common space, all of that is that it speaks to the underlying commitment that student experience is key in this change. And then the next piece for Camosun is for us to support them to reach out to their students and have their voice be heard. And in other colleges, we've done some work with students that really focuses around their learning experience and things that they want to experience in the future.
Just to sidebar that, what we did do with students is we created a survey that students could get into, again, because we didn't have the capacity at the time, technology-wise, to use Thoughtexchange with students. The only way we could do it was through just a regular survey. The downside of the regular survey is it doesn't cluster, it doesn't let you see, thoughts of others, there's no star system. So it showed us where we had to put some funding, and so we have done that. We're looking forward to engaging with students around the facility side of this, which is the next piece, and we're hoping that we don't necessarily even, the technology with Thoughtexchange that we're talking about is using just a different process. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Kevin?
Yeah, that's great. So one of the latest tools that we have is the ability for leaders to go out and ask their own questions of their staff or of students. And so for a long time as a company, we have been focused on this professional services side, about making sure that we support these large-scale engagements, which we do and we do well. And now we're starting to empower our leaders the leaders that work with us to be able to ask questions on their own. And that's part of the what we call a standard exchange, and it's part of our basic essentials package. And when we train leaders to use our tool, it's a lot about what are the right questions to ask and the right time and how to use the information in your decision making. All a part of what we do. And the nice thing about using having leaders do it themselves is that you build capacity in your organization for this kind of work ongoingly.
Sure. Okay. Thank you both. And there's a great lead-in, actually, to a next related question. The person says, our college recently announced intentions to gather staff, faculty, and student input on the development of our upcoming strategic plan. What suggestions do you have for including student input in the Thoughtexchange process? Kevin, do you have, you mentioned your clients or partners including student input. You have any advice there?
That's great. I'm actually going to pass this one to Sherri for the answer here.
We would have included them in the initial process if we were able to. So I think it's critical, and it's really good to be able to, you may want to use the same process, or you could ask different questions of students, depending on the kind of question that you're asking. So for example, in the strategic planning question, what resonates with you about the last strategic plan? Probably not a question I'd want to ask students, because they probably weren't here when that one was developed, and it was out of date for a couple of years. So I would probably do two separate ones and come up with really good questions for both the faculty and staff and then the student one.
That's great. And the thing I would just add to that is it's always important when you're thinking through the kind of exchanges you want to run or the kind of process you want to create is to really look at what can students impact. So don't go out and ask questions, or don't go out and ask for feedback about things that they can't impact in the process. And so that you're setting the right expectations, and also in our work, we found it's really important to focus on the underlying issues. So instead of asking people what they want to do or what they think you should do or what they think you should change, asking them about the kind of experiences they want to have. What do they want to be able to accomplish? What's important for them? And so that they can be involved in that process or participate in that exchange. And then it allows the leadership to make decisions at addressing those underlying interests versus getting a laundry list of things to change. And so we're careful there to frame the conversation in the right way so you don't end up democratizing your decision. Back to you, Kurt.
Great. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Next one says, thank you for your story, Sherri. They're curious if you've been able to quantify the impact of this and have these insights helped your conversations with your board.
Oh, that's a great question. I'll start with the quantifying. I think I might, when I mentioned chatting with faculty and staff about did they take part in the process in any way, and how people told me that they felt very involved because they could, do some of it at home, etc. That, to me, that was, it was justifying and validating by walking around and talking to people. There was nothing that I can say, a number, except for I think that the number of people, the fact that we increased the number of participants, same number of employees, the second go-round, which probably was a less interesting topic. We're talking about facilities compared to the strategic direction, said something in itself. So the increase in numbers. We've done some faculty engagement surveys, and in our province, we take part in these through the government. And right now we're into our second one, and the numbers have dropped off. So there's a comparator that I think, wow, they were, the faculty and staff were very engaged in this process, not as engaged with the numbers dropping off on our second go-around. So that's kind of the statistical piece that I'm looking at. As far as our board was involved in every part of it. So they were involved in the Thoughtexchange process, and then we did a session with just the board, and then they were invited to all of the strategic planning sessions, and it's been the same with the initial steps of the facility. Their comments to me was they thought that it was a great idea to engage people, and I made sure too that I said, if you have any questions about the process, or if you don't feel comfortable with doing it, I'll sit with you and do it, because I wanted them to take part so that they could go out and speak about what we're doing when they're out in the community.
All right, great. Very interesting. Thank you. Kevin, there's a question here. They say our college actively seeks feedback from local business leaders when we develop new majors and professional development training. Has Thoughtexchange ever been used for something like that? Kevin?
Yeah, another great question. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is that it really depends on, the way that you get out to people is by sending them an email or a link to participate. And if you're going, in the Thoughtexchange, you don't necessarily have to divide all of the different groups. You can do a larger process where you can ask, staff, students, faculty, and also leaders and community leaders, and then break apart the data based on the demographic questions that you ask them. So that allows you to see maybe how local leaders are thinking differently from faculty, say, or how local leaders are thinking different from students, and that information then can be used to help develop those programs, those trainings and new programs. And in other colleges, we've done taken different approaches to this, and a lot in our K-12. We have about 200 K-12 customers in North America as well, and so they do a lot more kinds of program design, trying to figure out how to build magnet schools, how to deal with the changes in STEM and all those kinds of things. And so well-versed in that kind of work and doing a little bit of that in the collegiate space too as we get going. Does that answer your question there?
Hopefully, yeah, and they can comment if, oh, they just commented, yes, it does. So there you go. Great. Kevin, just another short, straightforward question, just asked how much does it cost? I wonder if it depends on the implementation, or if you have an answer for that, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kurt. So yes, it does depend on the implementation, but it ranges in price. So we can start as low as $5,000 for taking with our essentials package, which is taking a group of leaders and training them how to use the tool and getting started building capacity internally. On the professional services side, more of our advanced exchanges, that really depends on the number of people that you want to go out to, how many times in a year, how much support you need, how big is the moderation going to be, if it's groups of hundreds, it's smaller obviously than if there's tens of thousands of people participating. So all those sort of depend on the kind of professional services you need, and for that, what we ideally do is put together a scope of work for each individual college, and then put a price to that. So typically it can range from, like I say, sort of the essentials package all the way up to a few $100,000 depending on the scope and size of the projects.
Sure, great. And related question asking, how do you get started? How does an institution start this process, Kevin? You talked a little about getting started there with some of the training, but maybe you could touch on that, and I don't know if Sherri has thoughts on how Camosun got started.
Yeah, that's great. Well, part of our the services that we provide is to come in and just have a really thorough conversation about what are the goals? What is it that the organization is trying to achieve? How long does that do we need to be going out to the community for? Meaning, is it a 2-year cycle? Are we like Sherri did, are we talking about just going out in general and talking about facilities first and then putting together a plan and going out about that plan and then getting feedback on the implementation of that plan? There's sort of a process there, but that really just speaks to, if you want to get started or learn how to get started, book a time with us. We can come in, we can present our solution to your team and have a conversation about what a scope of work can look like and how we build buy-in at the leadership level for that plan. And all of that is done on a case-by-case basis, and we do that free of charge as part of the initial service we provide.
Maybe I'll say how I got connected and wanted to engage Thoughtexchange in our process. Before I had come to Camosun, I had seen a presentation that Thoughtexchange had done and at a workshop conference. And when I arrived at Camosun, I thought back to that time and contacted them to see if I could have a conversation with them along with our institutional research department, because it was important for me that I wasn't just bringing in this process as a new president, that it actually went from our institutional research department. So the director met with Thoughtexchange, liked it, and then said to me, well, I think we're going to use them, but it was their decision in the end. I just came up with the idea.
All right, great, thank you both. Well, it looks like at this point we've hit all of our questions. Thanks for everyone who submitted a question on behalf of University Business. I'd like to thank Sherri and Kevin. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and expertise and telling your story with us. And of course, thank you to Thoughtexchange for their generous sponsorship of our event here today. And to everyone in our audience, of course, thank you as well for joining us. I do hope you found our web seminar informative and useful to you. Producing events like this one is just part of our mission at UB to inform college and university leaders like you about the latest news and trends in higher ed management. You'll find more coverage about issues such as the ones we discussed here in the pages of our monthly print magazine, as well as on our website. and in our free daily e-newsletter, UB Daily. And as I mentioned before, for those of you who'd like to share this presentation with your colleagues, or if you want to go back over it at your own pace, you can access it from our website by going to the URL on your screen here, where it will be posted as an archive recording within about 48 hours. And if you'd like to download the slides and go back over them, you'll find instructions and a link in a thank you for attending email that you'll receive later on today. So keep an eye out for that. So that is it for today's event. Once again, I'm Kurt Eisler for University Business on behalf of our producer, Joseph Morrow, and everyone on my production team. Goodbye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for joining us today.
That's great.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.